Okay, so we are recording. Hopefully, if I know how to run this thing. Yes. All right. Welcome to topic 5, and we are going to talk about object relational and object-oriented database modeling systems or models. We're just going to, the purpose of this topic is just to do a comparison to what you've learned about database models um, to some of the different ones that are out there. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to run anything in an object-oriented or object-relational database model. We've tried to do this for several years, and we just haven't been able to find a development system that we can have everyone everyone after the system. So unfortunately, this topic for the next couple of weeks is all conceptual. I'm going to ask you to do your research, etc., and you get to write. I know you're dreading this part of the course, but it'll be more fun than you can ever imagine, right? Yes, I know I'm on drugs or something. All right. So our schedule for this evening, I'm going to have a quick review for topic 4. Ask for questions. I have a little video presentation that will talk about predictive analytics. And predictive analytics, as you know, or may not know, is becoming a big part of the big data and decision-making data triads and all of that. So predictive analytics is something that you should look into or investigate. It is something that's becoming more and more important for data scientists and data analysts and all that. And then I'm going to talk about just interesting facts about employability. I know a lot of you are working adults, or I won't speak to you as if you're, that green senior coming out of college for the most part. But I think employability is still something that we should concern ourselves with, even as we're shifting positions or changing, even as far as changing industry. There's certain things that employers are looking for, and it's not just, do you know how to deal with data? It's that and more. And then we will have our showcase, and the following individuals will showcase their material from topic 4. And here's the bonus for if I choose you, and I did this, I like doing this because it creates an incentive. If you're chosen to showcase your materials, you're exempt from the discussion questions the following week. So these 3 individuals, and that means they're just optional. You can pick to choose to answer them or not. And the reason why I do that, and the discussion questions are good, but it's an activity that may or may not, provide a learning association, because we don't really get a chance to go into a discussion forum the way that they were designed. Basically, they're just an activity. So, and essentially, I would probably choose just about everyone to showcase their material. And when I'm asking you to showcase your material, you can deny, but then basically you don't receive the bonus. But I'm asking you to share your screen and actually walk through what your solutions to the problems yourselves. And yes, there'll be some repetition, but once again, that's another way to see how your classmates. This is a whole peer-to-peer learning process. How do your classmates approach some of these problems? Because we did have some interesting, some very similar, but some interesting approaches to the assignments. So the victims for this week will be Emily, Sylvia, and Ram. So you can all choose to participate or just say, I really don't want to, because you're putting me on the spot and I'm just really afraid to put myself out there. So these 3 individuals are being asked to showcase their work from last week. All right, and then I'll go into topic 5. I'll list the objectives, and we'll have a quick lecture on object-oriented database modeling. And then the DQs, in-class participation assignment, descriptions, well, the DQs, assignments, and the in-class, all of that at the very end of the class, and then I'll provide you some time to work on the in-class assignment. Any questions about our schedule?
No, sounds good.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Are my three volunteers or voluntold individuals, are you willing to present your work?
Yes, Professor, I'm ready. Yeah.
Ron says yes. Emily?
Yeah, I'm ready.
And Sylvia?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So prepare yourself for that in a little bit. I'm giving you a chance to gather your thoughts or whatever you need to do, and then I'm just going to step aside, and you guys will show your class your level of intelligence or just your approach to assignments. So, all right. So let's start out our adventure with a little bit of levity. I pulled this off of it was actually in a virtual conference that I was a part of last week. And I thought this comic was pretty indicative of the times. And basically, as you see, the couple's walking their dog. The dog has a cone, and the woman has a face mask, and the man has a cone like his dog. And the caption is, if you have a better way to help me keep my hands off my face until the pandemic ends, I'm all ears. So I thought that was quite comical. And I think as we continue with the COVID and the pandemic and all the changes, I think we always need a chance to smile about things. So I thought this was quite clever. All right, so first let me start. Are there any questions about the topic 4 material, aggregate functions, specific questions that you want to know? I know that there's some interesting, well, there was a couple interesting things that were happening with the queries. I'm trying to actually offer an explanation for them. But any questions about the topic or the assignments? They're all very ominously.
Actually, I do.
And who's that? Is that?
This is Bronislav.
Go ahead.
It was, I believe, last question, if I remember. I kept getting error and error and error. And by mistake, I just typed in one letter, random letter.
Right.
And it started working. So I started testing it out. I just started typing nonsense, just anything, and
Right.
it worked.
Yes. And
So I don't know why. I mean, there was a lucky guess on my side. It worked, but do you have any idea why did that happen?
well, we're gonna talk. Well, I guess this is the time to talk about that because I know that a few, like Javier, had the same issue. And what happens when you add that? Okay, let me back up. Generally, and you'll see when Ram does his presentation, you cannot use your alias for your case in a where clause. And I had said that originally when we were introduced to case when then, you cannot use that alias. It does not recognize. You have to use the whole case when information in your where clause. So, but when you add that single letter, you're fooling the SQL Server system. It's actually accepting the alias. So when you say case then, and then in as whatever, then now that statement, just because you add the single letter, I know that's a weak explanation, but I cannot find anything to verify why that worked with the single letter, unless some of you have figured that out. What I found out with the single letter, it actually fools the SQL Server engine. So now all of a sudden the where clause will accept the alias. But in general, you should not use the alias that you use for the case when then in your where clause. And for some reason, and I have 2 or 3 students where that worked, and there's not really any, at least from what I can tell, there's not really any particular reason. I could dig further into the SQL Server, but what it appears to be is that it fools the system to accept that where clause or to accept the alias in the where clause as another variable. So that's my very weak explanation, but I know that a couple of you, and I think the system will, if you take the single letter out, obviously it'll produce an error because of the reason that I stated. I mean, you should not use the alias in your where clause, but to be frank, I'm not sure why that works. I can't find anything to substantiate that that's a valid function. So the fact that you all stumbled on it, and let me ask you this, like Branislav, how did you come up with adding that letter, or did the system actually add it for you?
I had to look up on W3 School 3 website and few other blogging SQL websites. I was just looking and I read the comment. I've been straightforward. I found the comment. It says just put the random letter. I'm like, huh, okay. And I was impressed. It worked. I was like, oh, I just fooled a SQL. This is cool, but at the same time, it's not. So I found it on one of the blogs that was. I was just researching. I was like, why is this not working? And I was just looking and I found it. And person said it works in this way, but technically you don't do it. So I'm like,
right.
Huh? Okay, but it worked.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. Someone either discovers that there's some type of, even probably something built in that will allow you to use the alias in that case when, and it's only with the case when then, and then you end as. And the whole thing with number 5, I mean, basically you need to filter out and display just interactive. So you want to add a where clause. And that was actually the tricky thing about that between 4 and 5. So those of you that discovered that, I didn't take off for that because I really couldn't figure out through my knowledge why that would work unless it's some type of glitch on the SQL Server side, which it probably is. And it's not really a glitch, it's just something that was added on. So kudos to you all for figuring that out, I suppose. All right, any other questions about aggregate functions and dealing with nulls? You all did very well with that. Just to let you know, across the board, I only had a minor issue with number 1 because of the statement throughout the years. But technically, to be thorough, you wanted to create an average for each of the year and then a total average. And many of you just provided a total average. And that doesn't give a sales manager the averages throughout the years, all 4 of the years. So that's, if you're wondering why you have a
They
few
should
things.
rephrase that.
Well,
they should say for each year, not throughout the years. It's 2 different, wordings, means different things.
No,
Yeah, I did that too.
there's a reason why it's stated that way. This is one of the things that you'll run into with management. They have their own language. So you have to essentially interpret it, use your own skills to interpret what you know that they want. And if you think about something like a scenario like that, when you create a report like that, they don't really want a total. That means nothing to them. They want to see, if there's any trends, there's any things that they can create predictive models or whatever. So they would want to see each of the years and then maybe a total to satisfy their curiosity. So that, yes, it can be rephrased, and we probably will rephrase that, but that was what was meant by that. So I only took off I only took minor deductions for that. And the thing of it is, I was grading on a curve. So if everyone, and I did have a class where everyone did that same thing, I would not deduct it. But we had a few people, and you'll see the showcase that actually interpreted that the way it was, even the way it was written. So, and the thing of it is, it was about half and half. So I couldn't really state that, yes, that's bad verbiage. And although I do agree with you, it could be worded, well, that would just make it too easy. So, all right, any other questions? Okay. All right, so this is just a short video speaking to the idea of predictive analytics. It's becoming quite, well, there's so many things happening around it. So I did want to just show you this quickly, and this is one of the companies that provide a kind of an approach and platform, but it will become a part of the analyst's responsibility. You need to be a part of these predictive analytics scenarios. So here we go. One second. Let me make sure I'm in the right place.
Hey everyone, I'm Julia Beauchamp and I'm the host of IDG's Tech Talk YouTube channel. If you like this video, then head over to our channel for more top stories and in-depth discussions about all things tech. Whether you're an IT pro or a general tech enthusiast, we help you dive into the complex tech news of the day and answer your burning questions. Check us out at youtube.com/IDG Tech Talk and subscribe for new videos every weekday. Thanks for watching and we hope to see you there. What is predictive analytics? Transforming data into future insights. Predictive analytics is a category of data analytics aimed at making predictions about future outcomes based on historical data and analytics techniques such as statistical modeling and machine learning. With the help of sophisticated predictive analytics tools and models, any organization can now use past and current data to reliably forecast trends and behaviors milliseconds, days, or years into the future. Retailers often use predictive models to forecast inventory requirements, manage shipping schedules, and configure store layouts to maximize sales. Airlines frequently use predictive analytics to set ticket prices reflecting past travel trends. Hotels, restaurants, and other hospitality industry players can use the technology to forecast the number of guests on any given night in order to maximize occupancy and revenue. Predictive analytics can also be used to detect and halt various types of criminal behavior before any serious damage is inflicted. By using predictive analytics to study user behaviors and actions, an organization can detect activities that are out of the ordinary, ranging from credit card fraud to corporate spying to cyber attacks. Models are the foundation of predictive analytics. They are the templates that allow users to turn past and current data into actionable insights. Some typical types of predictive models include a customer lifetime value model, which pinpoints customers who are most likely to invest more in products and services. A customer segmentation model groups customers based on similar characteristics and purchasing behaviors. A predictive maintenance model forecasts the chances of essential equipment breaking down. A quality assurance model spots and prevents defects in products and services. Model users have access to an almost endless range of predictive modeling techniques. Many methods are unique to specific products and services, but a core set of generic techniques is now widely supported across predictive analytics platforms. Decision trees, one of the most popular techniques, rely on a schematic tree-shaped diagram that's used to determine a course of action or to show a statistical probability. The branching method can also show every possible outcome of a particular decision and how one choice may lead to the next. Regression techniques are often used in banking, investing, and other finance-oriented models to forecast asset values and help users understand the relationships between variables such as commodities and stock prices. On the cutting edge of predictive analytics techniques are neural networks. Neural networks are algorithms designed to identify underlying relationships within a data set by mimicking the way a human mind works. While getting started in predictive analytics isn't exactly a snap, it's a task that virtually any business can handle as long as it is committed to the approach and is willing to invest the necessary time and funds. Beginning with a limited scale pilot project in a critical business area is an excellent way to cap startup costs while minimizing the time before financial rewards begin rolling in. Once a predictive analytics model is put into action, it generally requires little upkeep as it continues to grind out actionable insights for many years.
All right. Okay, one of the reasons why I wanted to show you that, basically due to COVID and the pandemic, there's tons of enterprise level corps that are using predictive analytics to try and help the economic recovery, especially in the hospitality and travel ranks. And with that being said, they're looking for data analysts that will help build these models. So I think it's important to recognize that predictive analytics may be a part of your future, or well, it will be a part of your future, I should say, as we begin to establish the new norms and everything that we're having to deal with as a result of the pandemic. And I've seen a lot of conversation and discussions about, where do we go from here? What is the data going to tell us? How do we frame it? So just keep that in mind. It's something to think about. I know a lot of you are interested in data analytics, so predictive analytics will be a part of that, especially now as we go into this new era of how we do business and how we think and how decisions are being made. Any questions about that?
Yes, I actually have a question.
Right.
She did mention the tools that she didn't mention the tools that a business analyst would use for these, but she did say there's a lot. So can you just name a few?
It's a good question. I can name a few, but to be honest, a lot of the front end and predictive analytic tools that are out there now are actually in the process of being changed, which is why, she didn't mention any, but I'll just say at the core of these predictive analytic tools, it's still some type of database model that, some analyst is tasked to make sure they're working with a database administrator to ensure the data is available to begin the predictive analytics. And that includes archival data, current data, and even predictions on trends creating trends based on what could be possibly listed as future data. So I know that's kind of a weak way to answer that, but I wanted to provide a list of tools, but every single one that I came up with is in the process of being restructured. And a lot of it, unfortunately or fortunately, are proprietary. So some of these larger corps are building their own front ends and building their own tools. So they're not using things like Tableau or Excel even, but they're using some combination, some hybrid of Azure and SQL Server and Oracle front end tools. So I would keep in mind those three major ones are part of, well, from what I can tell, and most of the information that I was able to obtain was very mysterious and very gray, so it didn't really point into anything specific. So
why are the old ones being eliminated?
Because they're not as useful, and some of them can't handle the big data, and that was already a trend that was happening in the last 5 years, is that they can't keep up. So some of these models are being hybridized to ensure that it's processing data, because we have the technology now and we have the bandwidth as far as networking, but we don't have the front end tools like Excel, for example. It's a very weak example, but you can do a lot with Excel, but just think of attempting to handle several terabytes of data with a spreadsheet. if you want to think about it that way, it's impossible to handle that level of data. And even something like Tableau, or even something like SQL Server, or some of the Microsoft engines, they're useful, but you will need thousands of analysts handling thousands of points of data just to keep up with the amount of data that's being moved now. And that's kind of the issue. And that's another one of the solutions that most corporations are in the process of re-engineering. And they were, making progress within, obviously, everything has changed. And that's another piece of the puzzle since COVID. So the thought process is that we have to accelerate some of these things that we were predicting even from the beginning, 5 years, 5 to 10 years. Now, there's a lot of predictions that these platforms have to be in place by the next year. So that's the amount of acceleration that I've discovered that's out there now. And there's a lot of developers and engineers and analysts and everyone working on that.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome. Any other questions? So with that, because I know all of you, I think all of you are interested either in enhancing your ability to perform some type of analytics, or be an analyst or an engineer or an architect dealing with data. Those positions and those particular titles are so needed in industry. The problem is that it's not something that you can do a Google search and say, or a job search, a job post search, and match exactly those titles to actual jobs. I can tell you now that unless you find I would say, I've seen a couple, just like essentially a data analyst, most of the jobs that deal with data, and some of them are associated with IT, some of them are associated with engineering, some of them are associated with business practices, but all of them are not very, obvious, I should say. So what will happen if an employer thinks that you have the ability to understand data analytics or predictive analytics or any type of analysis route, they will be asking you specific, maybe even specifically obfuscated questions just to see if you really know what you're talking about. So what I wanted to talk about briefly, what are the qualities? And this has been a research that I've been a part of for the last 10 years because it's something that I like to convey to students. I mean, what do you really need to know to be, to get hired? What are the employabilities? And it doesn't matter whether you're newly graduated or changing jobs or a stay-at-home mom that has decided to go back into the workforce. These particular aspects, a group of us, we actually posted on a few of the major, well, it's mostly on the tech side, but we posted articles about this very, what I'm going to share with you now. So what are the qualities that will get you hired? I mean, whether it's tech related, whether it's data related, even whether it's in something like finance or any of the fields. So, I'm not going to just read this. Obviously, I won't read the slides, but these are snippets from the articles that we have written. And basically, this particular part of the article was actually part of a research scenario that I participated with colleagues at Michigan State, and they produced this report that's actually utilized across the NCAA, and was actually posted at the government level, at the federal government level, last year. And essentially, this research questioned about 3,400 employers, and we essentially analyzed their responses to come up with what were they saying are the most important parts of someone who's preparing to interview or preparing to do something as far as employability. So when speaking to some of these hiring managers, they are very clear, and I know you probably hear this quite a bit. Everyone is talking about soft skills, and believe it or not, this will make or break you in any type of interview scenario. And everyone thinks that it's not, that's just things like critical thinking or communication or just, you know, responses and behaviors. Well, essentially, in a nutshell, these things have become quite important. In any field, I mean, we're talking about even high scientific fields. Gone are the days where communication is not important. My first job as an engineer way back 40 years ago, essentially we did not have to talk to people. We just had to talk to our peers, and we could talk any type of language, whether it's programming language or just this non-ridiculous, you know, graphic language, or even just digital language. But now, even something like that is just highly, highly important. So the first thing that was discovered from this research is that employers are interested in your level of enthusiasm. Do you represent yourself as enthusiastic? Are you telling them that, yes, this is the job that you want? This is the job that you dreamt of? I mean, it sounds very, very almost, you know, placid or almost, you know, overindulging, but that's the number one thing that everyone's looking for as far as interview approaches. Yes, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. Yes, professionalism is important, but you can still be enthusiastic and be professional, and that takes a little bit of practice. You can't go in there with over enthusiasm. Obviously, that's almost scary. But essentially, for example, and especially now, because most of the companies are looking for, can we trust you to work from home? And even though the data are proven that most people who are comfortable at home, that are hard workers, will be even harder working when they're at home. But some people are, yeah, the isolation is a little bit too much. But fortunately, or the one thing that we, across the board, the one comment that we heard constantly was, how do they display, or what are their levels of enthusiasm? And the second thing is fit, and this just means that have you done your research on the company culture, the company environment? Some cultures are very lax. Some cultures are, you know, basically casual wear. Some companies are formal. I mean, semi-formal ties, suits, and all that. So it is always recommended that if you're looking at a certain job, you need to figure out how do you fit into that particular position, and interviewers are going to ask you that. I mean, do you think you fit? And yes, you look nice on the interview, but what happens afterwards? So fit is very important. And then, are you hardworking? I know this could be subjective. Hardworking could be just, to some people, just doing exactly what you're told to do and not doing anything more or less. But hardworking will exhibit itself. Basically, what have you done? What were you doing when you were not working at home? Did you show up to the office on time? Or something like, were you available for your children? Did you pick them up on time? Things like that. There's all these kind of inner questions that may be asked to test to see if you truly are hardworking individual. So items like effort and persistence. Did you give up easily when you're in a tough situation? These are definitely questions that will be asked during an interview. Then high quality work. How was your work? You know, one of my favorite interview questions. How do you qualify your work? When a manager gives you a particular assignment, do you interpret that and say, well, I'm going to do exactly what he says, or do you create a higher quality based on what your experiences are? And this is always a trap that I've seen. Unless you do that, then your performances or your performance reviews will go down, because essentially you're doing exactly what you're asked to do, and that's never really exactly what's being asked of you. And whether it's interpreting the verbiage or just, you know, satisfying a particular project assignment or whatever, high quality work is always something that's being asked for. And then, as I said, professionalism. And so once again, this is a subjective term to some degree, because professionalism could mean many different things. But simple things like being respectful and being accountable and dress and all that counts as professionalism. Even the way you speak, most formal corporations, because I've been there, done that. I mean, they don't really like you waltzing in and speaking whatever language that you feel is appropriate, because it's something that some way that you talk, some way that you've spoken before to friends and other associates, and then family too. We have our own language for our family, and in most instances, it's not necessarily appropriate, even though some companies will say, well, this is your family. And you're probably thinking, not really. But anyway, professionalism. So, I mean, that's pretty straightforward, but it is something that's addressed quite often. And then flexibility. Flexibility has become the buzzword. And as listed here, because of COVID, I mean, I'll just give you an example. Almost overnight, just about every industry was sending individuals home. And they had to figure out exactly how to do the same amount of work or more work from home. And some of these individuals did not even have supportive internet or web speeds or networking. So this is why the IT industry was so busy. I mean, over a couple of weeks, the support structure was there from all the internet service providers and et cetera. So then the flexibility had to be very, very high. And it was very, 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 very evident across the board as far as industry. And this, I guess it is the resilience of our workforce. It was really not, for the most part, it was not too big of a deal. Now that's a generalization, but I know, for example, in education, some of my colleagues have no idea how they were going to handle teaching from home all the time. Yet we did not have, well, a lot of that were students, yes. And that side of it as well. Some of the students had no idea how it was going to feel and how the fit was going to be, when they were not in the classroom. So yes, flexibility is key. And especially dealing with data analytics, all of that. I mean, someone may think that we need to adopt a new model, et cetera. And essentially understanding the idea of flexibility is so, so very important. And then maturity, yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. And we can't act like children. We can't act like toddlers. Well, I don't know. Some of us never really grow up, but I think at some point we have to represent ourselves as adults and all that. So maturity, and believe it or not, a lot of the hiring managers were stating that, yes, we get those individuals through the interviews, and then all of a sudden they become a little boy or a little girl, and they have no idea where they're at and what they need to do. And so you don't want to represent yourself that way as far as your employability. You do have to act like an adult at some point. Independence, yes. And peer group work is fine, but you do have to slow down. No, you do have to show your independence, especially I don't know, some of you, I've never been a micromanager, but I've worked under micromanaged individuals that were micromanagers. And basically, if you show your independence, then they have no reason to be a micromanager, and they'll usually just leave you alone. So employers are looking for that right away, right from the start. Even if you're not sure of what you're doing, you still need to be independent, and you need to be independent enough to ask the right questions. So that is another part of independence. And this is probably more associated with what has happened since the pandemic, but it is pretty substantial. The high quantity of work. In IT, it is expected. Yes, you have your primary responsibilities, but we're going to ask you to do 10 times more. And it's probably most industries now, because everything is changing, and so they're tasking everyone to do more. So you do have to produce a high quantity of work. And you'd have to represent that, you know, if you're given a situation where you have to explain how would you handle doing 10 things all at the same time. And you can't say, I'll just faint and try and do it tomorrow. That won't work. And then, and I did want to stress this, and this is not like a trick or anything. I know a lot of you will be faced with the idea that, well, this particular position is asking for so many years of experience. Well, there is such a thing as relevant work experience. And this is last because it's the biggest trip up or the biggest obstacle that most interviewees face, or most prospective employees look at. They look at that statement that says 5 years experience, and then they think, well, I'm not really qualified. Well, in my mind, and I think it's all about relevant, and everything is relevant. Life is a relevant work experience, but you have to state it in a way that the interviewer knows that you have experience. Now, they will ask, and the first line of interviewers won't ask you about specific questions, database questions or analyst questions, because they have no idea. They just want to know, how do you handle yourself with the 9 other aspects, and can you explain how you would be a benefit to the particular company. So you have to remember that years of experience and all that may not count as relevant work experience. And this is the one thing, I mean, the hiring managers went on and on and on, because they figure that everyone gets so trapped around, you know, what this particular term means, and it may or may not mean you've been working in that job for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. It may simply mean that you've been through college, or you've been a stay-at-home mom raising children. That's relevant work experience, believe it or not. And I tell that to all the women that I interview when they're so concerned that I don't know how to handle a position like this. And simply, well, you've raised your children, right? And they seem to be okay, right? So yes, you have quite a bit of experience. All right, any questions about that? No?
This is
No.
really good information, Professor.
Yeah, thank you for that.
You're very, very welcome. And yes, please remember those. And it's so prevalent now with the establishment of what will be new norms across the board. And you know, from what I've seen and some of the meetings that I've been a part of, both on the tech side, both on the database sides and all that, everyone wants to position themselves, both the employers and the interviewees and everyone, so that, I mean, these things can be, you know, viewed upon as a tangible and very important part of how the business is run. So, all right, let's take a breath. Yeah. And go on to topic 5. All right, topic 5, our objectives. We have 5 or 6, 4, 5, I don't know. We're going to look at the features and uses of object-oriented programming and methods, and we're just going to touch upon them. I'm not going to get into details about object-oriented programming. I will talk about methods, and I'll just talk about methods as it's associated with kind of this paradigm of what's happening with relational database models, or what did happen, and what were the results, and basically why are they making resurgence. Okay, then we're going to describe key features of an object database management group. And this is a little bit confusing because ODMG doesn't really even exist anymore. It actually started the whole idea of object-oriented database modeling, and then it was disbanded after a couple of years. But the aspects of what were created during that time, you know, we need to focus on a little bit. So it may or may not provide a better understanding of the object-oriented database modeling system, but we need to know that that's the origin of how it was started. All right, contrast the attributes and utility of relational database modeling system, which is what you're working on now, versus object-oriented databases. And there's 2 types of object-oriented databases that we're going to look at. they're either object relational database modeling systems or truly object-oriented database modeling systems. And you will be tasked to take a look at both of those, and both are kind of like hybrids of what you're working in now as far as your SQL Server and relational database modeling system. And then describe the advantages and disadvantages of the ORDBMS versus the OODBMS. And you'll get tired of saying those two after the next couple of weeks. All right, so those are our objectives. So let's talk about the ODMG. ODMG is Object Data Management Group. It was conceived way back in 1991. It was a bunch of database administrators and managers, and Rick Cattell from Sun Microsystems, which eventually became Oracle, decided that we need to look beyond the relational database model and figure out how something that will stop some of the difficulties that we're having with these upcoming, third, fourth generation programming languages. So in 1998, the ODMG changed its name to the Object Database Management Group and reflect the expansion of its efforts to include specifications for both object database and object relational mapping products. And object relational was the hybrid between the relational database model and all of these aspects of object oriented programming and systems. All right. So the primary goal was essentially to make sure that these specifications were set up so that the transition from the relational database model was easier. And we'll talk about what was happening then, because we had the relational database model with SQL, and then we had this influx of programming languages, Java, and back then it was C, and some of the other third generation languages. And basically it was quite a gap between running these applications and operations on the front end and having, because they were all based on retrieval and management of data, then having them lock into the relational database modeling system, so the ODMG was designed to try and lessen that gap. So between 1993 and 2001, the ODMG published 5 revisions of its specification. And the last revision, I think 2001 or so, was a 3.0, which is, I think we're up to, they actually came back, or not the ODMG, but another group offered a 4th version, a 4.0 version. But the 3.0 version was around for quite a while. It's been around for nearly 20 years. And essentially what that meant is that from those specifications, the developers, the administrators, the programmers were able to combine and have a set of standards that they could use to build these database modeling systems. And specifically, we're moving into this whole, and this is the early 21st century, and just to give you a brief history, I'm not going to go into it a lot. The early 21st century was this influx of, yes, we need database systems that can handle complex data, not just tuples or records, but complex data, vectors, videos, something more than just storing tons and tons of tables. And it was a big issue, because this is the evolution of some of these applications that required these types of data. All right, and along with that, so if you think about this, along with that, you had all of these programmers, and I can tell you right now, because I was kind of one of them, I was actually both one of the programmers, I programmed in Visual Basic, that knew nothing about SQL. So you're trying to retrieve data from a relational database modeling system and you're using a programming language like Java. And there was really no way to combine the two. And we'll talk about the idea of impedance mismatching in a little bit. So just to describe object-oriented programming concepts such as encapsulation, polymorphism, and these are concepts in programming. I'm not gonna, I will task you to research them, some of them if you have not been exposed to them, but this is all the object-oriented programming side. And we're mentioning these because what will happen or what is happening. These particular aspects are providing an infiltration to our asset properties as far as your relational database model. Remember those from 605, automaticity, consistency, isolation, and durability. These were the identifying factors of why or how a database modeling system can be stable and credible. So what was happening as far as this infiltration of object-oriented systems with all of these aspects, classes, and polymorphism, it was just almost. And just to back up a little bit, you have to remember that object-oriented programming is built on objects, and we'll talk about this more. And that doesn't really map completely to a tuple. Remember, a tuple is a record, a group of records in your tables. So there's all this mismatching between what was needed for these applications and what needed to happen to actually retrieve the data. So just digging into what an OODBMS is, OODBMS, and I talked about this a little bit, it will follow, or it is designed to follow all the rules of object-oriented programming. So it's based on creating objects, and usually, and this is one of the basic premise, if you want to simplify an object-oriented system, basically it's built on objects. And you have objects, and the identifier in an object-oriented scenario is an object ID, and that's as simple as it is to describe how the data are configured in an object-oriented database management system. Now, that seems very straightforward, but obviously those objects should be very simple, from a very simple object or a class to something that's absolutely complex, but it's still treated as an object. And there's certain things that the programmer will need to do on the back end to ensure that that object, that database object, is available. And that's therein is the problem with this type of a database modeling system. So an OODBMS is a full-scale object-oriented. I just kind of explained that. It offers the system, the development side of it, and the actual data. All of the data are considered as objects, and it makes it easy for the programmers to build these structures based on their programming prowess to deal with the data without going away from their object-oriented environment. So in a nutshell, an object-oriented database modeling system is just another extension of the object-oriented, programming system. So an example, if you're running, Python is a part of it, but I won't go Python right now. But if you're used to Java or C, for example, basically you can invoke a object-oriented database management system, and it's just a part of the programming, it's part of the classes, part of how the structure of the object-oriented database is. So you don't do anything different. Now that's generalizing that side of it. And I said I'm not really going to go into that because that in and of itself is a full-scale lesson, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this introductory is just to provide a brief idea, one, of the differences between the modeling systems and how one can be very complex. Well, they both can be complex, but one, unless you know or you're used to the object-oriented system approach, then it just becomes very, very confusing. And so that's why we don't want to just, I don't want to confuse you too much, because there's a lot here that I'm trying to force you to understand, and it may or may not be as clear as it should be. So I would definitely recommend, reviewing some of the material we have in LAOcloud, and ask the questions if you need to, please. All right. So I talked about this a lot already in brief. The OODBMS is essentially accessing objects. This is very different than the relational database model, which is using using a query using SQL, and basically you're usually using some type of interface, which is the connection between your front end and your actual server. But essentially, SQL is the core of the RDBMS, which is why it's so important that you're learning this. And for the problem is that SQL is not a programming language; it's a scripting language, or it's a query language. So, and there is a difference between those associations. So please remember that. And I've talked about this, but essentially with the ODBMS, your data structure is usually complex. It's always complex. So graphs, vectors, hash tables, any type of unique data set. And there's some enterprises that have their own types of data. They create their own types of data. The astronomy field has well vector data. And that's stored as an object and treated as an object. And there's no way that there is a way that you can expand and extrapolate that into tuples or records or text even, but it becomes quite complex and hard to differentiate between the actual object itself and the actual data point. So, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail as we go through these over the next two topics. So when a client requests an object from a database, the object is transferred from the database to the application's cache, which means that basically through the programming languages, there's a request and the object is pushed forward. It looks very much like a select statement if you want to compare it that way, but it is a little bit more complex than that because there's certain aspects that has to happen. And if you know anything about an object-oriented programming language like Java, just to print something to the screen, there's certain things that you have to do with the programming language just to recognize that there's data that needs to be represented. All right. Yes, I'm going to, if this works might not work on my Mac. I may have to. But here's a very kind of a fun video that will describe or lessen some of the confusion. So let me fire up my Mac here, or my PC, because it's not going to work on my Mac. So throughout all that, any questions? Comments? Anything?
Okay, so far.
Okay so far? Oh, good. All right, so give me a second, fire up my PC, join the meeting. Let's see if this will work. Can you all hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't hear that.
Yeah.
Volume issue.
This is really quiet. I don't hear him very well.
Okay. We're getting an echo. Make sure
Yeah.
you Hold on. Don't give up on me yet. Let's see. Here we go. All right. Are you all still with me?
Yes. I was checking my
Yeah, still here?
connection.
Yeah, we're here.
Great. Okay, here we go.
Databases. Oh, scary stuff. No, I'm kidding. Really? No. The databases are not scary. And there's nothing has to be scary about it. That's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to demystify your database. We're going to show you how to use it in the best possible way. Very simple, very clear. Open the door, step into the database world. Let's talk databases. Hi, guys. Let's talk about something very interesting today. Let's talk about object-oriented versus relational databases. Are you an object or are you an entity? That is the question of today, at least. First of all, what you have here is my wonderful drawing of the house and the tree. And what is meant to represent is reality. Now, just like this drawing is not a very good representation of a reality, the same way, none of our models are very good representation of reality. It's good enough. You understand that this is a house, right? You may not want to live in this house, but you understand that it's a house. Same way, all our models, these are just models. You understand, you find a way to manipulate a certain concept, deal with it, do whatever you got to do, and you're out of there. Okay? Now, you have two different approaches, in the database world at least. A relational, which is the grandfather of all approaches. Back in the 60s, was first formulated based on the set theory. And it has really run since then with very little changes. We've been living in a tuple world for a long, long time now. Then after some 20 odd years, came around Mr. Object-Oriented. Because you know what? Most people were programming in the object-oriented world. And they wanted to persist their data. So why do they need to break their heads with these ORMs, right? Saying it gives you allergy. The object-oriented, object-relational mappings. What is them? You're programming in an object-oriented world. You want to persist your object. That's all you want. Why you got to break your head? How is it going to break into entities? How is it going to fit the constraints? You don't have enough problems as a programmer. You don't need additional worries, right? So that's why people started saying, hey, we're smart. We're programmers. Let's make object-oriented databases. How about that? Take your object, plop it onto a disk, and go home. Everybody's happy. Not so fast. It turns out that really there is no one right model, right? Everyone's got their own slice of the reality. It's like peeping through a keyhole. I really like that. Think of things as peeping through a keyhole. It depends on the keyhole. What do you see? Right? Sometimes the keyhole is a little wider, you see more. Sometimes it's a little narrow, and you don't see a whole lot. And same thing here. In the relational world, you see things the way that they should be, could be. It's a world of possibilities. I'm sure you've seen the Venn diagrams, right? Bunch of circles overlapping like this. This is a world of possibilities. Each circle is a set of possibilities. And like, for example, I can have a courtyard with one or more trees. It's a set of possibilities. Do I have to have a tree there? No, not at all. But can I possibly have a tree? Yes. In the object-oriented world, it's a different peephole. I have to have a tree, but don't have a tree, that there's nothing to talk about. What can a tree do? It has a method. It can grow, right? It has properties. It has leaves, branches. That's the object-oriented world is a lot more natural, but it's also a lot slower. Because the wonder of the relational model is that through mathematical tricks, you're suddenly able to operate on thousands of trees at a time. Not like the object-oriented world where you have to go one tree at a time. You want to grow a tree? Okay, one at a time. Here, you can grow a whole forest. Boom, you have a forest, right? Now, nothing is perfect, right? The relational model is very good. It's very solid. We all love it, use it, blah, blah, blah. But it's not everything. And it's got its limitations, and especially now when we're getting a lot of unstructured data and people are breaking their heads on how to put it into the normalized tables, this is where we really get into the new animal, the object relational database management system, ORDBMS. Trying to say that 3 times fast. But truth is that all major vendors, IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, they're already there. They already allow you to use objects. They allow you to use programming languages, and that you use to create your normal applications, to create your own custom objects, custom types, spatial data, you name it. It's free for all now. And I think that's the direction that we're going to be going in. Because you're going to see more of an integration, and you're going to see more of this peephole wearing away, and people getting better and better at modeling the actual reality as it is. And you're going to have much less of a problem with the mappings, and you're going to have much more natural division of responsibility between the application layer and a database layer. And that's really, I think, where things are going. And we'll discuss that in a different
All right. Thank you for your patience through that. I think that's a very good video in explaining kind of the differences between the two models. He didn't really go into any details, but you kind of get an idea of how you can actually develop an understanding for the different models. So let's get back to PowerPoint. Okay, so let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of the ODBMS versus the RDBMS. The advantages, and this is specifically looking at the object-oriented database modeling system. The advantages: it's composite objects and relationships. Objects in an ODBMS can store an arbitrary number of atomic types as well as other objects. So in essence, it is possible to have a large class which holds many medium-sized classes, which themselves holds many smaller classes and infinitum, which means that basically you can have an object to be as simple and as complex as you would like. And that's a big thing in the object-oriented world as far as data. So, but in a relational database, basically that would equate to having a huge table with many, 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 many fields, or many, many small tables that are normalized and linked by keys. So, and a lot of I can tell you right now, Google's original database was a 5 terabyte RDBMS data structure, and it had some 500,000 tables. So, so I was like dealing with that, but as opposed to an object-oriented database would be quite a bit simpler on the front end, but more complex as far as the objects. Okay, an advantage, having many smaller tables is still a problem, or is still a problem since a join has to be performed every time. And joins aren't bad, but if you have 1,000 joins, well, that may, well, in the old days, that would create, you know, very, very, very time concerned issues. We would run queries that would last for weeks, literally. We would run of course, the technology was were much slower, and the networks were non-existent, and basically I remember running my first SQL on an IBM mainframe, and I would run a very simple select statement, run it, and then come back 7 days to see the result. So yes, if we had millions of tables, that would be a problem, even for us in this higher levels of technology. So the fact that an OGBMS is better suited for handling complex interrelated data than and that is a fact. Now, you know, there's certain scenarios where RDBMS would simply be applicable or appropriate. Others, you probably would want to use an ODBMS because of its compatibility with the object-oriented space. Okay, still on advantages, class hierarchy. Now, a class is like, well, you have objects, but within those objects, as far as the object orientation, there's a class. And I'll just tell you now, I don't know if any of you have done any object-oriented programming. Your class is kind of your basic, your main unit of concentration in the object-oriented world. You have class and you have methods and all that fun stuff. We won't go into that, but if you hear class in the object-oriented space, then that is a very important part of the database model, like the entity or the tuple in the relational model. So if we look at an example, the ever popular employee in an RDBMS, where an employee can be an employee and an employee can be a manager. Or in my case, let's look at in education, let's look at a faculty member that's also a student, that's also a staff member, which that was my case. So how do you represent that? You would have to do that with some type of relationship with keys and all that. But in an ODBMS, in this example, an employee would just be a class, and then the manager would be, well, the employee class is simply a parent class of the manager class. So just think of the hierarchy. You have a class, and then you have subclasses, you have child classes, and you don't need to make a relationship. You don't need to force a relationship. The relationship is already there. Let's see, turn my camera on. So I have all these hand gestures. All right, let's continue. Oops. Another advantage, circumventing the need for query. Yeah, this is a big one because, as I said before, many of those programmers were really, SQL was actually below them. They really did not want to deal with coming from their Java or their C to build SQL, which is, they had to actually create dynamic SQL to communicate to the RDBMS to actually obtain the data that was needed. And sometimes there was a big gap in understanding, because SQL would be quite a bit different than their building their classes and their languages. So essentially, what the OODBMS will give them is that they don't have to remove themselves from their programming languages to handle the data. So essentially, they don't really need to worry about SQL. If it's truly an object-oriented, even an object relational, everything is acquired through the programming language. And then here's a big one, this impedance mismatch. I can remember this. This is where in the video he talked about, the ORMs, the object relational mapping generally is, and there's two facets of the impedance mismatch, and you'll read about, and I'll explain them very simply. And it's associated with the programming language and the relational model. Generally, the relational model is only accessed and managed through SQL. So you automatically have a gap, and you would have to actually do mappings between the entities and the relational model and the tuples to the objects that you needed on the object relational or the object-oriented or relational database side. And that would require quite a bit more programming. And sometimes it would be tedious programming to map all of these tables and tuples and entities and relationships to an object. So that big gap, as far as the programming size, is a part of the impedance mismatch. And then the impedance mismatch has to do with data validity and data credibility, because if you have as you know, if you start mapping things, there is a chance that things are not mapped correctly, and there's not, you can't specifically identify a cardinality where you have a one-to-one. It's every single aspect of that object has to be mapped correctly, and the more mappings, the better a chance that you don't have that stability based on the asset model. So you don't have those atomic types. And sometimes that is missed, and that's a bad thing as far as data. So now you're going to data credibility and data validity, which is always a bad thing if there's a question. So once I know, I'm pretty sure you're going to be tasked to research impedance mismatch. Remember those two aspects of it, and there are several versions of that. But generally, it is the mismatch between the programming languages and the programming environment and what is needed for the RDBMS. And that was a big problem, which is why the ODMG was formed, because programmers were spending an inordinate amount of time just figuring out how to obtain the data needed for their applications. And so that is an advantage, because with the ODBMS, there's no need to worry about a gap between objects and entities and relational models, et cetera. So with that, an advantage, you don't have to deal with primary keys or form keys or any type is a relation to or has a relation to. It's just simply an object ID, and either you need its complexity or not. So basically everything is removed, and all you're left with in an ODBMS is an OID. As simple as that. And any object-oriented programmer will know how to handle an OID based on the data that they're dealing with. And there's no limitations on the values. So there's no limitation to the data types, data values. It is pretty open as far as what you can do in ODBMS. Okay, and still further, there's truly only one data model. It's an object-oriented data model. Whereas in relational, we have entities and we have ERDs, and you can have several types of submodels or schemas or whatever, and you don't need to deal with that in an ODBMS. And we talked about this. Basically, with an RDBMS, you're dealing with entities, and you have to build an ERD or entity relationship diagram, and that will show you the relationships is related to and all that. You don't have an ERD in an object-oriented database model, and you have a unified modeling language diagram, a UML diagram, and this goes in alignment with the programming languages. It's basically how a programming scenario would be signified. And so with your database model, it's just the same thing. You have to remember that the database, the old DBMS, does not change any of the environment of the object-oriented system. And that was the benefit of it. So everything fit right into the same, categories and structure. Okay, there's two huge disadvantages to an old DBMS. And the first one, if in an RDBMS, you can change the schemas, you just simply need to change the relationship if you're going, for example, in our AdventureWorks, we have the person schema, the employment schema, the human resources, and we've created all these relationships. If any of those schema changes, we just create a new relationship. It's that simple. And it usually takes a very short amount of time. This is not true in an old DBMS. You cannot simply change a schema. You have to change the whole programming environment, the entire environment, all the associations, all the instantiations, everything has to change. So that's the one big thing. If you change one portion of that object-oriented environment, and you have to remember that affects everything else, because that's how the object-oriented works. I mean, everything is, in essence, it's not interconnected, but it does have an effect on, is more appropriate. So that's why generally once those object environments are built, they very rarely will change something like changing a database. And it's not really referred to as a schema. This is the environment. Remember, this is an entire environment. The object-oriented database modeling system just fits into it. So it's like rebooting everything, or reprogramming everything. So that is one disadvantage, is there's rarely any type of change from that perspective. So I just essentially further identify how that works. And if you're a program and you think about the compiler and all that, I mean, simply recompiling a program once it's running is not necessarily effective when these things are all running based on particular database objects. So that is a huge disadvantage. You rarely see well, you cannot do a minor change like a schema change. It is impossible. It requires quite a bit of programming. Right. So with that, even dealing with the pros and cons, primarily this was the comparison of the old DBMS to the RDBMS. As we just learned, object-oriented, and I would say the beginning of the 21st century, probably more so like between 2005 and 2010, I mean, it was a big push to move everything because of the amount of data with the age of big data and what was known as NoSQL, but I will tell you that NoSQL was not NoSQL. NoSQL was just hidden SQL because programmers had figured out they still needed that to connect to these huge RDBMSs that were still running. And essentially the purpose of this slide, and you'll run into this quite a bit, the object-oriented technology has taken off, and it is in the forefront, but there's still nothing to replace those huge database systems that are still, those huge RDMS systems that are still out there and still running. The Google system that I mentioned earlier is actually still intact and still part of the Google environment. And it's a huge RDBMS. It's not really separate from they have many, many layers, but the core of the data that's stored at Google is an RDBMS. So the point here is that you will run into relational database modeling systems. Yes, there'll still be some concern about impedance mismatch, but generally the database administrators and the programmers and the analysts, they're all learning that there's really nothing, no matter how, and I guess it's a balance. There's some systems that will go strictly object-oriented, but the amount of data that they're handling it's almost impossible to move away from a completely independent relational database model. And I've discovered that even in the last, well, pre-COVID, I mean, there are DBMSs were actually making a resurgence. A lot of for example, in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of conversion from analog, from paper, from clipboards to digital. And so a lot of those conversions were happening. And at first it was simply, let's create these objects, these informational objects, but what was happening, it was not, the programming could not keep up with the needs for the healthcare industry, and this was pre-COVID. So someone had designed a relatively high-end or ORDBMS, so it was relational, it was a hybrid between between relational and object-oriented. And yes, they had object relational mapping, but the mappings were pretty straightforward. So it's like patient records and things like that. So it was doable as far as a hybrid. And a lot of the healthcare professionals are learning, or the ones that work on the database side, are learning that this is probably more of a useful system than what they were originally moving towards. So yes, the relational model will not go away. And basically, these two slides are just explaining that the impact that the relational model has had in the last 50 years now is still persistent. And yes, SQL will be here to stay. There's SQL, the NoSQL that you've heard about is SQL buried in a programming language. Python has a very, very, very prominent SQL element where basically it's dynamic SQL, but you're calling objects that are more like procedures, and in the core of those objects are select statements and different SQL functions. So the point here is that relational database modeling system did not become obsolete, not by any means. It's still a very prominent part of dealing with big data, believe it or not. And that's basically what I talk about. Any questions about our lecture? Or did I put everyone to sleep? Are we all still
No,
here?
still good.
So good. Too much information.
Too much information. Of course. Too much information alert. Yep. So the one key thing I want you to take from this is that, yes, we do have object-oriented, object-relational models, and we'll talk about this more in the next topic. But please don't lose what you're learning about relational, even from 605 to this class, what you're learning about relational database modeling systems and SQL and tuples and entities and all that, because that is still very, very important. And SQL. Phew, okay, deep breath. Stand up, stretch your arms. Let's take a 10-minute break just to gather our thoughts before I go into the DQs. So let's reconvene at 7:25.
Okay.
Sure.
So it's about a 12-minute break.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you recording this still? I don't know if it's still being recorded. Is it?
Yeah, thanks.
Oh.
Now it's still being recorded.
Oh. Thanks.
Yes, I'm still recording it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Fernando. All right. So once again, I'll say now that it's recording, whenever I'm asking you to justify your ideas with support, you can reference the topic materials, you can reference anything you find in your research, and you can reference the lecture itself. That is fine. As long as, I see that you're using materials appropriately with your DQs. And that is required of the DQs. You always should justify your material with some type of support. All All right, on to the assignments, or the assignment, excuse me. All right, yes, it is a writing assignment. I will want you to treat this as, it says 100 to 250 word essay, essay that includes, and I don't, okay. Let me preface this by saying I'm not a word count grading instructor. I don't count words. I look at the relevant material. I don't, if it's more than 250 words, if it's less, I don't really, I don't care about that. I know it may be important, but I mean, write as much as you think you should or as little as you think you should. That's fine. What I would suggest, just use, copy the assignment information into a Word doc and use each of these questions as a frame for your answer. And your answer could be 1 or 2 sentences or a paragraph, whichever you prefer. But I do want you to treat it as an essay type. So either a header, a title header with your name, or a title page, either of those. I know you've all been doing very, very well with that. So continue that. All right. So that's my snippet on writing assignments. So using the textbook and topic readings and appropriate resources from the internet, response with a real world example for each of the following questions. Define a tuple. How and where does a tuple fit into relational database theory? Why is this important concept to understand? And that question seems not important, but it is absolutely important as far as, you know, analysts and analytics, you're always referencing either entities or tuples, and you need to know what that means in a relational model. Number 2, how does an object-oriented database management system compare to a relational database management system? So just do a quick comparison. What are the key features and how can a developer utilize them? So basically this one, just once again, it's very similar to the DQ2, but I do want you just to write briefly what you feel the key features are. And I know that's kind of redundant, but unfortunately we haven't changed that assignment yet. Number 3, what is the difference between a relation in an RDBMS and a class in an ODBMS? And this is very, very important. And I will tell you now, please do not state that a class and a relation are the same, because they are not. So that gives you part of the answer. Are they interchangeable? And if so, how? So be very careful when you answer that. I do want you to do a little bit of research on what a class is in object orientation. All right, contrast the object relational database management system, and that's the ORDBMS, and yes, you'll get tired of all the acronyms, with an RDBMS. So there's subtle differences and there's subtle similarities. I just want you to provide a brief contrast. So describe the unique features and provide an example of how an ORDBMS might be preferable to a regular or plain old tuple-related, entity-related RDBMS. And your ORDBMS is a database modeling system that is different. I do want to stress that. Number 5, contrast the attributes and functionalities of an ODBMS versus an ORDBMS. So now you're moving to comparing the object-oriented database management system with the object relational database management system. And I know, yes, this is getting a little cumbersome, but it is important that you recognize the differences between basically all 3 of these management systems. Okay, why are RDBMS platforms used more frequently in business than either of these object-oriented platforms? And that is still true. When we wrote this question in this course, it was questionable, but now it is definitely true. As I said, RDBMSs are still persistent. So I want you to offer your opinion of why they're used more frequently. And it should be should be relatively straightforward. Okay, from an ERD standpoint, and that's your entity relationship diagram, would there be a significant difference between using an ORDBMS versus an RDBMS? Please do not overthink this question, because if you think about it, it answers itself. Explain why or why not, and any specific instances in which differences are the deciding factor. So this, from an ERD standpoint, this question should be easy and simple to answer. I'll just state that. I know that in the past I wasn't very clear about how to answer this question, but you're looking from an entity being the keyword, relationship diagram. So remember that, please. All right, so prepare this assignment. Yeah, I don't want to explain APA style guide, which, by the way, may be not our default, depending on how things go. But I just want you to use, college level writing, etc. The one thing that I do not like is grammar and syntax and spelling errors. That drives me nuts. So please take care of that. I mean, there's several tools, even Word. And you should, and you are required to submit this to Lopeswrite, meaning I need the similarity score and all that. All right, any questions about the assignment? No questions?
No, good.
No questions.
No? Okay. So you're in class / participation. So remove all that object-oriented nonsense from, it's not nonsense. So sideline the object-oriented association for a little bit. We're going back to relational. And I just want you to build, it's a simple relational RDBMS assignment. Back to the AdventureWorks and all that. So the purchasing manager has requested you to create, or whatever that verbiage is, a report that provides a quick list of active preferred vendors and their credit rating. So basically you're going to find the appropriate tables, and you want to produce a result table that includes the following: the vendor name, the credit rating, the preferred status, the preferred active status, the minimum order quantity, the maximum order quantity, and the unordered quantity. These are all your result fields. Okay, any questions about the in-class? And yes, remember this counts for half of your participation. So this has to be submitted to the QTI or question 2 instructor to get those 10 points. So 10 points from being here, 10 points for completing the in-class participation. Okay?
Yeah, Professor.
All right. No questions?
I have a question actually.
Fernando.
So for the preferred, that's the status that you want to see, right? So for example, because there's non-preferred vendors, so we got to figure out how to take those out, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Let's see, that's a good way to approach it. I will say yes. That can be a part of it. Basically, I want to see if they are preferred or not preferred. So you can either provide a list of preferred status, which means that you should explain that it's a list of only preferred vendors. Does that make sense? Did I confuse it more?
Well, I know because it has like a binary, right? Either 0 for no, 1 for yes.
Yes, it's just a flag. Yes.
Yeah. So if I put the flag for the correct preferred, that's fine, right?
Yes. Yes, that's
Okay.
absolutely fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Welcome. Other questions? All right. So this in class, it is under the question 2 instructor. So if there are not any other questions, yes, please go ahead and work on that for the rest of the time we're together, and post it, and then I will see you all next week.
So, so Professor, we don't need to showcase our week 4
Oh, did I
details?
forget that?
Yes.
We buzzed right by that. Okay, sorry. Wait. I forgot about our showcase. Okay, so this is showcase time. That was supposed to be before we went into our assignments, but I got a little flustered. Maybe I overwhelmed myself with information. So the showcase order is Emily, Sylvia, and then Ram. So you are all in control of the lecture. So Emily, you can go ahead and share your screen and get started.
Okay, so I'm just gonna share the Word document that I compiled all my answers in.
That is fine.
Okay, so for problem 1, it's the sales manager asks you to provide the average pre-tax sales amount through the years, which I interpreted as throughout each year, because I've gotten similar requests from my own boss before, phrased exactly like that. Using the sales.sales order header table, what answer will you provide to the sales manager? So I'm just selecting the average subtotal, relabeling it as average pre-tax sales. I use this date part feature that I found when I was looking through SQL trying to figure out how best to display the date. So basically this takes this order date and says, I just want these 4-year characters.
Yes, that's one way
And then
to
I
do it.
did that as sales year from sales.sales order header, grouped by date part to give average sales per year. And then I also ordered it by the date part year to give them in order of what year they occurred.
Good job. Thank you.
Problem 2 was a little tricky. This probably took me the longest. So what I did, I started with this select statement here to say, okay, so what we want is the max of the total due. So what sale has the highest number? And then built out from there to say, now select the person ID that matches this total due, and then join in tables for person.person to get the person's name and their email address, and then put in a where clause to say greater than 2013 or 12/31/2013. I also could have used the same order or where'd it go? Date part to say where that equals 2014.
Right. Good. And your answer was?
Oh, and my answer was Shu Into with
Ito.
his
Yep.
Ito, excuse me, with his or her, I guess, AdventureWorks email right here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. And then this one, Joe Barry's manager indicated that Joe's taking some paid time off. They want to make sure that's reflected in the database. Since I have a Mac, I had to import all of it by creating a table instead of with the import through Excel feature. And since it was 250 some lines, I didn't want to type all of that in. So I actually created a query, or I basically concatenated all the fields in the Excel document to make them so that they're in the correct format to paste into the query that I ran, which is down. It's so long.
Thank you for doing that. I left that open just to let you know. Let's see what you all came up with. I wanted you to do something similar. Even if you only included like 20 records, that would have been fine. And which included Joe Barry, that would have been fine. But you did all of them.
I figured if I wrote the formula, I might as well use it for all of it. So
okay, there you go.
And then let's see, where did we go? Here. Okay, and then so once I got that table inserted, I concatenated first and last name, and then did this sum to add up week 1, 2, 3, and 4 to give us the total of monthly hours. And then where added in this first name again, because even if I had relabeled this as name, I couldn't have used this to call, to match it to Joe Barry. So I just did the whole thing.
Right.
And then I gave his total table results as name Joe Barry, monthly hours is 120, which is 40 less than a full month's, the full 4-week period. So I assumed that that time is reflected. I also, upon inserting the table or inserting all the data into the table, I couldn't figure out how to add in nulls. And so I replaced it with a 0. And basically, so if I had done this with a null, I would have said where this returns as null, then it would have given me the correct hours.
Right. So I like that solution. I mean, you basically handled nulls before they were a part of the table, which is another way to do it.
Right. Problem 4, similar thing, I had to insert the table. So concatenate first name and last name, and then I did case. If week 1 through 4 equals 0, then they're inactive, else they are active, and label that status. And then ordering by the sum of week 1 through 4. And that table was too long. I have to, give me a second and I can find the results here.
No, that's fine.
Okay, let me find where my...
233 rows, I think.
Yeah. I don't even... Sorry, I have too much stuff open and 2 screens and I don't know where anything is.
All right.
So yeah, then essentially it gave me all the rows and said whether it was inactive or active, and I ordered it by the weeks so that I could put everyone that's inactive on top, because when I first looked at it, everyone looked active, and I wanted to make sure that there were some in there that came up as inactive. And then I just, instead of doing order by, I did where, week 1 through 4 equals 0.
And you got your 4.
And then here's the results.
Good job.
And I think that's, the hourly query, and that's it.
Yes, I really like your solutions. Thank you for taking the lead on that. Great job. Okay, next is Sylvia. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So, so can you guys see?
Yes.
Because I'm doing what I submitted. So for question 1, I think I did pretty much what Emily did. So I selected the year, the order year, order date. I put the year in front because I wanted SQL to kind of group the average that I was going to, that I was interested in seeing according to the years. And then because that's an aggregated function, I had to use group by, and then ordered them according to the years. So this is the screenshot. For the second question, as part of an internal competition, the CEO requests that I provide the name of the employee who made the highest total sales in 2014. This data needs to include the filter, tax, and freight using order date for the year. The CEO has also requested that I provide the winner's email address so he can receive a notification of congratulations. So what I did, I used subqueries. First, I ran the table that had the sales records and selected the maximum sales so I could know who had recorded the highest single sale. And once I knew their name, I got their salesperson ID, which I later found is the same thing as business entity ID. And so when I went to the tables person.email address, I put the where business ID is 281. And because we were also interested in the name was in a different table. So I concat the first name, space, the last name from the person to person table. And since there was an aggregated function, I had to group by the year.
Okay.
And all this gave me that, the name of the person and the single maximum cell that was recorded in 2014, and there's their email.
Great. Good job.
For number 3, so Joe Berry's manager indicated that Joe was taking paid time off this month. He wants to ensure the system reflects this information. So import the hours spreadsheet file into AdventureWorks database, add Joe Berry's hours together for the month and title the field monthly hours. Use the knowledge you've learned about null values to provide the solution to the manager. So I kind of struggled with this one. I was overthinking this problem. But so I selected the name and the last name and used isNo for each of the weeks in case that there was a no value. I want Tico to cast that as a 0 so we can be able to add everything, because if I just add everything without doing that, I would get a no, because those and so I put the where clause where the first name is Joe, and this is what I got.
Good job.
So then number 4, the human resource manager wants to classify employees who were absent during the entire month as inactive. Using a case statement, write a query that classifies employees as active or inactive in a column titled status with full names. So what I did was I selected their first name, last name. So this, like I didn't put the concat, but the way the pluses work, it kind of adds it as a full name, and then selected week 1, week 2, week 4, because I wanted to compare that against when I now add their weeks using isNo and then put inactive to make sure that there were no mistakes, because sometimes SQL works even when, you know, it's not giving you the desired outcome. And so this is what I did. Yeah, and I ordered them by the status descending so I could see my nose at the first, because they were all spread out.
Right.
Number 5, using the same parameters as in problem 4, rewrite the query to provide only the list of inactive employees. So this was kind of tricky, like you mentioned, Professor. But yeah, so what I did was selected their first and last name, put them together as a full name, then the job title, and then use case when, all that, so case when all the weeks have a equal to 0, then that should, SQL should mark that as inactive, else active, and then that's the name of the column, inactive employee, and selected from the dbo.hours table. And I use the clause where all those weeks equal 0, and that's what I got.
Yep, that's a perfect way to do that. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. 2 different solutions, very good job. Okay, Ram, finish us off with, and dazzle us with your expertise. Oh, are you muted? Are you speaking yet, Ram?
Yeah, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, my solution is pretty much similar to them, nothing different. Just like in the first solution, I also use the year. Then since it is a amount, so I just included in the US standard notation with the $sign, with the commas and everything. Otherwise, pretty much same. Okay, for this one.
Okay.
And the second one, so instead of writing this select statement inside that join, I just took it out easy so that it will, you know, easy in terms of understanding as well. So like most of the thing it's a join based on the respective field, since we wanted to know the max amount that needs to be compared. So only for that field, I just included the select subquery inside this. So in where class, one is depends on the year, then the other one is depends on the max value, what we are going to use it for the total due.
And you also use the format function too.
Correct. Correct. Yes. So since it is amount, so for the better readability, I just included the format function for that.
Okay, great.
And the other two solutions pretty much similar to Sylvia. So this is the first one. I know that we can use even like the last class we used that collects and some other parameters as well. But I feel like this is the easiest way. Like if you don't found anything, like if it is a null, simply default it with a 0, then keep adding. So this is an example where the third week we have a null value. Since we handle that third week with if it is a default, then make it as a 0. Then it will not create any problem for us. And problem 4 is pretty much similar to Sylvia. So this is also same way. As she already stated, even I also figured out, even if you don't use concatenate function, simply first name plus double hyphens plus last name, even if you put that one as well, that is going to work as well. This is pretty much same, like using the isNull function.
Right.
And the same is the case even for the fifth problem.
I do want you to point out your where clause in number 5. Why did you use that?
So this is a one way, basically, like for inactive list, the main thing is if I use the status in the where class, it won't work because of that. We need to, there are two ways. Like one way I figured out is the easiest way is like I wanted to only concentrate on the inactive list.
Right.
So inactive list, when I added up everything, it will be equal to 0. So that is a simple solution. Otherwise, what we can do is simply we can put everything in something like this, like select star, something like this, and you can make it as this entire table as something A. Then inside the where class, you can use like where A dot status equal to inactive, something like that. It is also another easy way. But in that one, unnecessarily writing an additional SQL query or something like that. So I feel like anyway, like the condition is already known, right? In this way, it's very easy putting this way.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All very, very good solutions. Thank you, Emily, Sylvia, and Ram. And once again, the DQs for week 5 for you all are optional. It's strictly up to you whether you want to complete them. I will give you credit if you do not.
Thank you,
All
Professor.
right. Anyone else have questions about the assignments from last week? All right. So let's go ahead and go into in-class work time and finish up the in-class participation assignment. Once again, you receive full participation points when you finish and upload that in-class assignment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if it's too soon. So I'm trying to figure this out. I'm having a hard time. I got credit rating on this and preferred vendor status and on the purchasing vendor. I got that part, but I'm trying to figure out the second one, and I checking spelling and everything. I cannot get the data on max and minimum order. Do you mind if I share screen, or do you want me to send you?
Go ahead and share your screen. We're all going to help you.
I'm starting to get really frustrated now, but let me 1 second.
All right, no frustration, not allowed.
Professor, I posted the response for that week 5.
All right, so right here, I have no idea. I've been checked, nothing.
Well, you have does not have 2 T's.
Yeah, that's not null because it's right here, not null.
Yeah, it's misspelled. Not is misspelled.
Double T. There is a double T.
Yeah, there you go. And then on order quantity is not 2. You have 2 N's. 2 N's and on order. There you go.
You
Okay.
sure it's gonna work?
Yep. There you go.
Okay, it worked.
See, it's just simple syntax
Ah,
with more eyes.
thank you guys. Appreciate you.
All right.
No problem. Professor, I posted the week for exercise as well.
Okay. Thank you, Ram.
I also shared, I'm not sure it's optional, you can, but 3 links that has helped me a lot learn more about SQL. I just sent it in a group chat. Again, it's optional if you want to, but it helped me a lot.
Thanks, Branislav.
And some of them apparently are used for interview questions too. If you're being interviewed, there might be some questions in there.
Yep, that third one is very, very useful. Thanks. Branislav.
Thank you, Brani.
My pleasure. And thank you guys for your help on this one small silly thing.
You're
Are
welcome.
you able to post these in the WhatsApp group as well?
Pardon me, Sylvia?
I'm talking to
Oh,
is it Brian that posted the
Yeah.
link.
Oh, you want me to post it in there? Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'll be right back. I have to switch the user on my computer.
okay.